pag-uusapan po natin ay ang impact ng social media sa voter education. Okay? Yes, may PowerPoint presentation po tayo. Ayos. In the meantime, hindi po ako bagong spokesman, just to correct. I've been doing this for about 5 years, which means medyo 5 years nyo nakikita yung aking kapangitan. Today we're going to talk about social media. It's very important because social media, like you've heard since, I guess this morning, is making a really big impact on the way we do things and on the way we live our lives, especially sa mga kabataan. Ito yung mga tinatawag na mga digital natives, no? Yung mga namumulat na sa teknolohiyang digital. Okay na? There you go. Thank you. Can we have the next slide, please? So, if we're going to talk about voter education, the impact of social media on voter education, the first thing we need to do is to determine, or at least define, what voter education is. Next slide, please. This sort of thing, this is not voter education, no? Although that might be what comes to mind first of all. Yung mga listahan about paano magparehistro, saan magpaparehistro, paano magpala ng certificate of candidacy, hindi po yan voter education. Next please. So, ang problema kasi, there is no simple way to define voter education. Why? Because in the learning tradition of our cultures, napaghahalo-halo po natin yung tatlong bagay. Voter education, voter information, and civic education. No? So to simplify it, next slide please. Voter education, you can define that by bringing attention to what it aims to achieve. Voter education aims to create a climate of knowledgeable participation by potential voters. Ano po ba, next slide please, ano po ba ang knowledgeable participation? That's really just a fancy way of saying, informed ka, intelligent voter ka, nag-iisip ka. So, ibig sabihin, pag intelligent decision, ang pinakamahalagang punto po dyan ay yung decision making mo, merong pinagbabasihan. Next please. So, where do you get that information? Right? Where do you get the information that you can use, that you can process, para maging matalino yung iyong pagpipili? Next, please. Kadalasan, pag i-invite tayo sa mga voter education events, ang tinatanong, saan ako magpaparehistro, PICOS ba ang gagamitin natin, ano na nangyari sa source code? But none of that, you have to be very honest about this, none of that will help you to choose wisely. Diba? Bakit? Kasi hindi naman yung mechanism ng voting ang pinag-uusapan kapag pipili ka ng iboboto mo. Ito, this is voter information. It teaches you how to use the machine, teaches you where to register, teaches you all of the things that you need to know to be informed about the system. It does not help you choose anyone. Next slide, please. You say, let's listen to the politicians on TV. That's what everyone will tell you. Everyone will tell you, listen to the campaign, listen to them talk, ganyan. But really, when you see them on TV, are you seeing the real thing? Diba? Napakamahal maglabas ng ad. Hindi ako maglalabas ng ad na nagsasabing kumakamot ako ng tiyan ko pagkatapos kumain. Diba? Napakahirap papunta sa balita, hindi ka aapil sa balita ng namumulangot. Pero remember, yung mga kandidato nyo namumulangot, umuutot, pero hindi nyo yan makikita kung puro ito lang ang titignan ninyo. Next please. So, sino tatanong ninyo? Next. 89% of US internet users search online. This is the US. Alright? Hindi pa tayo ganito, pero we're getting there. But the idea is that there is an emerging trend. And the emerging trend is that people don't listen so much to advertisements as they listen to other people. So they search online to make the purchase. And why? Because online is where they get to hear the opinions of other people. Sabi nga ni Mike De Lorenzo, isang social networking expert, it's not about the websites. The websites are good, but when people go to the web, they look for experiences. When I went to Kenya recently, one of the first things I did was I went online to find out what people thought about Kenya. No, it's not. I don't need to know what the national product of Kenya is. I don't need to know how many people there are there. I want to know how travelers like me felt and survived the African experience. So it's the same thing here. Next, please. Very importantly, sabi ng spokesman ng Facebook, people share, read, and engage more with any type of content when it's surfaced through friends. Ibig sabihin, you are more likely to be interested in something that you hear your friends talking about. Diba? Parang ano yan kunyari, merong isang politikong nagpunta sa eskwelahan ninyo na hindi nyo naman kakilala, mas malamang pupunta kayo kung may mga kaibigan kayong manunood rin. Bakit? It's because yung experience is shared, no? Or kung meron ng nauna, may nakapanood na ng sine, halimbawa, mas malamang panunuorin mo yung pelikulang na ikwento na sa'yo ng kaibigan mo na maganda kesa sa yung pelikulang nakita mo lang ang trailer. Alright? So this is very important and I want you to keep this particular point in mind. Next, please. By allowing people to stay in touch with the current of the world that they live in, social media facilitates conversation. Okay? Social media is a way of talking to each other kahit na magkakalayo tayo. Okay? And this is the most important thing. When you think of politicians nowadays, when you think of voting wisely, dapat, ang sinasabi natin dito is people should not talk about campaigns. They should talk about conversations. And conversation is the specialty of social media. Okay? Next, please. I'll give you an example. Apple Watch. Okay? Individually, hindi tayo masaya sa nakikita nating mga kaepalan, hindi ba? Gusto niyo ba ng epal? Hindi ba nakakairita? Pero, yung individual inis mo, usually, gets, stuck inside of you. Ikaw lang yan. Galit ka lang. Right? But when you see other people talking about it, and then you realize that you're not alone, you're able to engage people in this conversation about epal not being a good thing, well then, it becomes a bigger thing. And it becomes more effective that way. Sandali lang. Can we have the technical staff? I think you have the wrong presentation. I shouldn't be here already. Could you please? But still, it's a good point to make. Thank you. It solidifies also your particular take on an event. And we'll wait for the other part of the presentation, but that's where it is, no? First of all, more than anything else, social media facilitates conversation. It allows you to talk to other people, it allows you to share information, and it allows you to build up your own opinion of a certain thing. Now, social media also affects voter education in two other ways. It's the two other ways that I'll show you now. As soon as we get it together. In the meantime, kantahan muna tayo. Alright, anyway. So, the first one is that it facilitates conversation. The second, social media increases reach. Alright? Sino ang nagko-conduct ng voter education? Sino ang nag-engage ng conversation sa mga tao? Okay. No, we do the second PowerPoint. 1 laps 2, please. It increases the reach. Why? Because traditionally, ang gumagawa po ng voter education, yung election management body, no? COMELEC. Yan talaga ang inaasahan natin na gumawa ng voter education. Pero, if you're gonna think about it, the COMELEC is not very well manned for that. Ang COMELEC, maraming tao lang yan sa Maynila. Pero pagdating sa probinsya, pagdating sa, outside of Metro Manila, we have one office in every city and municipality. And no matter how big the municipality or the city is, that one office is staffed by one election officer and one election assistant. So, kung malaki yung city or municipality, yun ang binibigay mong trabaho sa kanya. Kakausapin mo lahat ng tao doon. Hindi talaga kakayanin yun. Alright? So, reach is a very important tool that social media gives. Why? Because with social media, if you have access, for instance, to Twitter, and then you have 10 followers, and each of your followers has 10 other followers, even 5, even 3. The idea simply is that you can release a message that stimulates conversation, and when it will be immediately propagated, regardless of what time of day you tweeted, regardless of how often you've tweeted it, regardless of how many people you're actually in contact with personally. Right? This is even more important when you consider that we have 52 million voters in the Philippines. By 2013, we will have 52 million voters. Consider this. What is 1% of 52 million? Anyone? 1% of 52 million. 538? 520,000. That's 520,000. And 520,000, can you imagine trying to speak to 520,000? And of course, if you're going to talk about, say, an election, you basically divide 520,000 by the number of months that you have to do it in. That's still a ridiculously high number. Okay? How are we doing on the presentation? Is this 2? Could you back it up, please? Back it up some more. Alright. Forward, please. Balik. Okay, so let's start at the top. Next slide. Next slide, please. Next slide. So again, how are you going to make an intelligent decision? Next slide. Obviously, you're not going to get it from the normal sources, please. And of course, you're not... Next slide, please. Next slide. You're not going to be impressed by that, right? Next slide. Next slide. Next. 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 Alright. Stop there. Now, voter education has been traditionally conducted via lectures this way. Alright? What you have here is a typical voter education session where you have an earnest voter educator, and then you have a person who's falling asleep, and another person who looks like he's about to make a phone call. And there's another person in the back who just looks like he doesn't even know why he's there. The point here is that the traditional voter education approach is very limited in its effectivity. Even now, kayo, I see some of you taking down notes. I don't even know if you're taking down notes of what I'm saying. But I can rest assured everyone else here that the minute you leave this room, you'll probably remember 25% of what I said. So, voter education, traditionally conducted by lectures, not very effective. Next, please. So here's what I was saying. You're talking about 52 million voters scattered over 1,600 municipalities in 18 provinces covered by 17 regions. At 1% with an average session size of 50, which is already very generous because the ideal size is about 30, 25, 30. You're looking at 50, it will take you 10,400 sessions just to cover 1% of the voting population. And the time it will take is really 28 years. And I divided that by 365. Meaning to say, if you're going to do it this way, you can't get sick, you can't take the weekends off, and you're going to have to do it once a day. 10,400 sessions, it's never going to happen. Next, please. And worse, like I said earlier, in one ear, out the other. Okay? Why? And it's not your fault. It's really not your fault. We're just, humans just really are not meant to function this way. It's very hard to listen to all of the concepts being thrown at you in a period of 1 hour and retain any significant part of it. So, social media, next please. Social media, that's you in the middle. But remember, this whole diagram for that one person in the middle is the same diagram for this person out here. So you can see how overlapping all of these spheres of influence are. And within these spheres of influence, conversation revolves. Nag-uusap-usap kayo, you repeat the same things, and therefore, you achieve that other requisite of effective education, which is repetition, frequency. This is different from, say, a newspaper. Pag naglabas ka ng ad sa newspaper, you see it once. Do you see it tomorrow? Probably not, and you've forgotten it already, right? Unless your ad is something incredibly controversial, which people will talk about for a couple of days, but nevertheless, the limitation of the medium guarantees that you will not get even half the frequency that you need. Next, please. So, what you do with social media is that you make the information available in a manner that persists. Nandyan lang siya. YouTube, for instance, is an example of a social medium. And with YouTube, you can upload for free and it stays there. For those of you who are more business-minded, you have to understand that a lot of people now, more people now look for video than anything else. And if your ad were in a form of a video, then it can be returned to over and over again by people. And if you're lucky, if your video is funny, like for instance, who's heard of Chuck Testa? Who's heard of Chuck Testa? No one? Okay. What? How many? 2 minutes? 2 days? Alright, I have 2 days left. So social media increases the reach and it improves your retention as well. Next please. And finally, social media allows the sharing of good practices. And that is the most powerful impact of social media. Kami, for instance, dito sa isang lugar, we might think that this is effective, but sometimes problems and issues are universal. So someone from over there might have figured out a better solution. With social media, we can easily share these solutions. And that's why social media is very important. Next, please. Next. So it facilitates conversation, it increases reach, and it promotes best practices. And that's really, in a nutshell, the impact of social media on voter education. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sir James. I'm sure all of us are registered voters, so we can participate in the election. If you have any question, guys. By the way, Sir James is very active on Twitter. You can tweet him at any time. And he answers always. Never disappoints. Sir, yes, sir.
You can tweet me at Jimenez. Bilang uso naman yung pagsasabi ng Twitter handle. Jimenez, Jabjimenez. Please also follow at Comelec TV. Yes, sir.
Would you say na ang isang kandidato ngayon ng alam gamitin ng social media would have a good advantage of winning an election?
That's a very good question, ano? Unang-una, yung kandidato mismo, I'm sorry to disappoint you, yung kandidato mismo does not actually need to understand social media. Bakit? Ang isa sa mga usong plantilla item ngayon ay social media specialist. Diba? In 1997, I tweeted a joke and I said that I'm going to have to reorganize my office para meron akong Twitter operator. Little did I know that it was actually going to be a very serious necessity. No? And that's the danger. The politician who uses social media correctly definitely will have an advantage. One. Number two, unfortunately, the candidate himself doesn't have to be particularly savvy. Bakit? Nakikita na naman, may proliferation na tayo ng mga Twitter accounts na halatang admin. Diba? So, it's unfortunate because for me, it undermines the authenticity which was implicit in social media. Dati kasi sa social media, kapag may account ka, ikaw yun. Diba? Parang nagiging brand mo yung pangalan mo. Kaya nga, hindi ako gumamit ng alias eh. Kaya nga, Jimenez ang nilagay ko. Kasi gusto kong ako yun. Unfortunately, nung naging big business na rin ng social media, well, people realize na, I don't have to be that person. Kailangan lang may mag-tweet who sounds like me. Diba? So, yun yung downside nun. But will it give an advantage? Absolutely.
Thank you, sir. Any more question?
By the way, nakita niyo na ba yung Twitter account ni Mayor Lim? Oh, nakita niyo na ba? Lahat ng tweet niya nagsisimula sa letrang O. Galing. Sounds like him.
Any more, guys?